Let your eyes close softly now, and let the weight of your day dissolve like mist rising from still water. For tonight, we drift backward through time, past noise and rush, past stories too loud to remember, until we arrive at the edge of a quiet harbor where the sea holds its breath, and a such a ship waits, gently in the morning fog like a dream just beginning to unfold. It is April of 1912, and the port of Southampton stirs with the soft shuffling of boots on damp wood, the rustle of silk skirts brushing against coats, the whisper of coal smoke curling up into pale sky, and somewhere in the hush of early light, you stand at the edge of the pier, your coat buttoned high, your suitcase in hand, your breath clouding faintly in the morning chill, and before you, tall and still as a cathedral, the Titanic waits in silence. Her hull rises like a black wall against the sky, its surface kissed by salt and sun, for proud funnels reaching high as if to touch the clouds, their tops painted in golden ochre that gleams softly in the light, while her name Titanic gleams in brass lettering large enough to be read by the seagulls passing slowly overhead, each letter carved deep into the iron like a promise not to be forgotten. The crowd around you murmurs, but softly, as if they too feel the weight of what stands before them, as if they too know that this is not just a ship, but something more, something storied and silent and waiting to breathe. And so you step forward, slowly, your footsteps measured, your heart strangely still, as the gangway leads you upward into the body of the ship, into the hush of corridors dressed in polished oak and gold-rimmed mirrors, into a journey that has already begun. A steward greets you with a nod and a quiet welcome, his voice low and smooth, like the pages of a well-read book, and he leads you down the corridor to your cabin on B-deck. First class, just beside the promenade, where a wide window looks out upon the sea, and the light through the curtain is pale and quiet, like the inside of a seashell just touched by the morning tide. You set your suitcase down without a sound, the leather creaking faintly, and run your fingers once along the edge of the writing desk, the surface cool and smooth, the inkwell polished and unused, the lamp above casting a warm, flickering glow that sways ever so gently with the breath of the ship beneath your feet. You move to the window and open it halfway, and the breeze that greets you is soft and damp, laced with the scent of salt and the ghost of winter long gone. And below, far below, the sea brushes against the hull in slow, rhythmic murmurs, like the ship is humming to herself, telling the waves of where she will go, of what she dreams beneath her steel and steam and steel-bound secrets. After a moment, you step back and open your case, your hands moving calmly through folded linen and fine wool, laying out your garments with care, one by one, until the air smells of lavender soap and warm cloth, and the room feels no longer foreign but gently waiting, as though it too knows who you are and what you need. You dress in a soft brown coat, the buttons carved from dark wood, a scarf the color of riverstone looped gently around your neck, and with gloves tucked into your pocket. You step back into the corridor and climb the stairs to the promenade, where the sky has turned a clearer blue and the wind wraps around you like a lullaby, not cold but calming, not loud but alive. The deck stretches long and wide, the railings painted a soft white that glows in the sunlight, and beneath your shoes the wooden boards speak with every step, not with creaks of protest, but with murmurs of welcome, old ship language spoken through timber soaked in sea stories and the breath of distant storms. And then As your eyes drift toward the far end of the deck, you see her. She stands alone, facing the sea, a book held gently in her hands, the pages fluttering now and then as the breeze passes over them like invisible fingers, and her dress is a pale gray, the shade of fog just before it lifts, the hem caught occasionally by the wind, revealing boots made for walking, not for show, and a scarf the color of bone wraps softly around her shoulders, pinned with a silver clasp in the shape of a leaf. You don't know her, not truly, not yet, but the stillness in her posture, the way she watches the horizon, as though it is telling her a story meant only for her, pulls you forward, not with urgency, but with wonder, not with desire, but with recognition, like a song you half remember from childhood, suddenly heard again beneath the stars. You stand nearby, but not close, and for a time you both gaze outward, where the sea stretches like glass, soft and unbroken, and the sky above bends down toward it without end, and in that quiet mirror the Titanic begins to shift gently at first, then stronger ropes drawn in, water displaced, bells rung not in alarm but in ceremony, and with a low, steady groan, the ship begins her journey. The dock recedes behind you, slowly becoming smaller, and the town beyond turns to shadows and rooftops, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chime once, twice, 3 times, as if bidding farewell to something holy, and around you passengers wave handkerchiefs and lean over the railings, and children shout goodbyes, their voices carried backward on the wind. But you remain still, you do not wave, you do not speak, you only watch the horizon open and beside you. She remains to her hands now resting on the rail, her eyes half closed, and though you still do not know her name, you know this moment, and you know it is yours. That night, in the first-class dining saloon, chandeliers bloom with golden light above tables dressed in cream linen and gleaming crystal, and soft music plays from a string quartet near the staircase, their bows moving like sleep over the strings, each note folding gently into the next like silk drawn across candle flame. You sit near a window again, watching the stars rise and the sea reflect them, and just as dessert is served warm apple tart with sugared crusty, see her again, walking past, her dress now touched with violet at the cuffs, her hair drawn back with simple grace, and when your eyes meet, it is not lightning or fire, but something slower, something warmer, like the moment just before a match is struck, when the air knows what is coming, but has not yet caught flame. She glances down, so do you. And though no words are exchanged, the shape of something shared has already begun to take root in the hush between you later. As you return to your cabin, the hallway lit with golden sconces and the sound of distant waves pressing gently against the steel bones of the ship, you pause once at the promenade again, alone now, the wind quieter, the night wrapping itself around the ship like a velvet shawl. You look out at the water, at the stars painted across the sky, at the path ahead that only the ship seems to know, and for a moment you feel not like a passenger, but like a soul held in the arms of something vast and kind and silent. You enter your cabin, dim the lamp, fold back the covers, and lay your head upon the pillow with the softness of surrender. And as your eyes drift closed, you hear again the slow, steady breathing of the ship, the rhythm of its heart echoing faintly through the walls. And beneath that, the sea, always the sea, whispering, not warnings, but lullabies, not sorrow, but slumber, and just before sleep takes you. You remember the girl in gray, and the way she looked at the horizon like it was the last page of a beautiful book, and you wonder what chapter might follow. Morning arrived, not with boldness, but with hush, a kind of silver stillness that seemed poured gently over every surface, like morning dew across glass, soft and smooth and glistening. And when your eyes opened, you felt not startled or shaken, but carefully lifted, as if the very act of waking had been guided by the soft hands of the sea itself. The curtains beside your bed billowed faintly, touched by a breeze, too tender to stir anything but the lightest of silks, and through the half-cracked window came the scent of salt and steam, of chilled mist rising from the Atlantic and far in the distance, though you could not see it. Yet the morning sun crouched behind a shroud of pale cloud and seemed content to watch rather than shine. You rose slowly, as if still partly asleep, your thoughts warm and unfinished, like the edges of a letter not yet signed. And as you moved about the cabin, folding your nightclothes, brushing your hair with the carved ivory-handled brush that sat near the basin, you noticed how quiet the ship had become. Not silent, no, for the Titanic always breathed, always pulsed with life, but calm, like the deep inhale before a lover speaks, or a candle flickers before sleep. Your coat, soft wool, the color of autumn bark, fell easily across your shoulders, and the boots you stepped into gave only the faintest sound against the floorboards as you walked slowly toward the door, pausing only to glance once more at the small mirror where your reflection looked not hurried or prepared, but quietly curious, as if you were going not forward in time, but inward, into something already waiting when you stepped onto the promenade. The sea stretched out like silver glass, its surface barely touched by the wind. The waves so soft they seemed painted rather than stirred, and the sky above offered no bold blues or racing clouds, only a veil of soft gray, layered like smoke or parchment, and the entire horizon looked as if it had exhaled and decided to rest a while longer. Others walked scattered along the deck in pairs and solitude, their voices low, their steps careful, as though they too felt the gentleness of the morning. And no one spoke above a whisper. No laughter broke the hush, and the stewards who passed with their trays of tea and warm bread moved like ghosts, dressed in white eyes, calm, hands steady. And there she was again, Evelyn. Her dress today was a shade deeper than fog, something between dusk and heather, and her gloved hands rested lightly on the railing, her eyes watching not the sea exactly, but the line where sea and sky met in a long, slow embrace, and her scarf, pale ivory with the faintest embroidery of roses near the edge, fluttered now and then like the soft tail of a bird just about to lift. You did not rush, you approached without noise, letting your steps be swallowed by the deck, and stood not beside her, but near enough to feel the shift in air where her presence warmed it. And for a while, neither of you said anything, the silence stretching not like distance, but like silk across a table, smooth and waiting, and beautifully full of nothing when she spoke. Her voice was softer than yesterday, as if the morning itself had reached into her throat and lent her a quieter melody, and she said, "The sea is a mirror this morning. If we're not careful, we'll vanish into it." You smiled not in amusement, but in understanding, and nodded once, and replied, slowly, carefully, "Then let us vanish together, like breath into mist, like thought into dream." And she smiled in return, the kind of smile that doesn't change the face, but changes the air around it, makes it warmer, makes it kinder. You walked together, then, not hand in hand, not shoulder to shoulder, but side by side, with just enough space between you for the wind to pass and leave behind no chill, only the sense that it had been allowed to listen. She told you her middle name, and you told her yours. And you spoke of rivers and books and the way some people carry silence, the way others carry swords, sharp and defensive, and the way she carried hers like a lantern instead, lighting not herself, but the space around her. Later, when the fog had lifted and the sun pressed gently through the clouds, painting the promenade in pale honey gold, she invited you to join her for tea in the palm court, a room of glass and green shadows, where ferns reached up like whispers and the scent of citrus mingled with the softness of rising bread. There among the fine chairs and the quiet clinking of silver, you sat across from her and watched the way she stirred her tea, always clockwise, always 3 times, and how she let it cool just slightly before tasting it, and how her eyes wandered to the edges of the room, as if she were still somewhere else, somewhere on the deck, somewhere in the sky. You did not speak constantly. You did not fill the air with stories or questions. But when she asked about your family, you told her of your sister, of the summer you spent by the lake with nothing but books and the smell of wildflowers, of the way your father taught you to whistle, but not how to cry. And she listened the way a musician listens to a song that has no notes, only feeling. And when she spoke of her mother, of the house on the hill where the wind never stopped, of the piano that no one played after the war, her voice did not waver, but your hand reached for your cup too tightly, and she noticed, and she smiled, not the kind of smile that fixes sadness, but the kind that says, "You are allowed to feel this." The day passed like a poem, too long for one page, spilling softly into the edges of evening. And when the lights began to glow behind the windows, and the dining saloon opened its golden doors once more, you parted ways, promising nothing, naming nothing, only holding one another's eyes just a heartbeat longer than required that night. You returned to the deck, alone again, wrapped in a blanket of stars that blinked quietly above the Atlantic. And as the ship moved forward, always forward, the sea beneath it reflected each star like a promise, like a secret too beautiful to say aloud. You leaned on the railing and looked down into the black mirror below, and for a moment it felt not like water, but like time itself, stretching and shining, still and silent. And somewhere far behind you, in a cabin where curtains whispered and lamps glowed low, she was likely sleeping, her breath even, her hands folded beneath her cheek. And though the cold touched your fingers and the wind pulled gently at your collar, you stayed for a long time, eyes wide, heart slow, listening to the sea, not for answers, but for permission to feel what was beginning. And the ship sailed on, wrapped in quiet, cradled in stars, and carried by something greater than steel or steam, something older than time and softer than memory. The third morning drifted in gently, neither brighter nor darker than the last, but cloaked in a velvet gray that soothed the ship like a lullaby. And as your eyes opened, you were met by a stillness so complete it felt sacred, as if the entire ship had paused in reverence for something about to bloom. You rose slowly, your fingers brushing the edge of your blanket, the linen still holding a whisper of night's warmth. And you sat at the edge of the bed for a long moment, letting your feet find the soft carpet below, letting your thoughts arrange themselves like petals in a quiet bowl, and listening once again for the subtle song of the Titanic breathing through every timber, every pipe, every polished rail. The air in the cabin had a faint scent of rose, soap, and salt, and the morning light filtered through the sheer curtain with a softness that kissed more than it revealed. a kind of gentleness found only in memory or reverie. And as you dressed, you felt no hurry, only the warm rhythm of quiet intention. Each button slipped through its place like a bell chime in the fog. Each fold of your sleeve aligned like poetry on parchment outside. The ship had stirred, not bustling, never bustling, but moving with a graceful hush, passengers gliding like shadows across the deck, stewards folding napkins as if they were prayers. And near the far stairwell, Evelyn waited, dressed in midnight blue with a ribbon threaded through her hair the color of burnt cream. And when she saw you, she said nothing, only tilted her head in greeting, as though the hours had never passed since last you stood together. "Come," she whispered, and her hand reached for yours, not to hold it, not yet, but to guide it gently, like a lantern pulling you through the fog. And she led you past the well-lit halls of first class, past the gleaming brass and polished banisters, downward, always downward, toward the decks below, where warmth lingered not in chandeliers, but in music and bread, and the closeness of breath and skin and firelight. You had not been below yet, not too third class, where the ship was less about luxury and more about longing, where families pressed close in small cabins with hearts wide open to the future, where children laughed over chipped mugs and mothers braided their daughters' hair with fingers that knew tiredness but also love. And as you stepped through the threshold into this different world, it felt as if another Titanic had been revealed, not grand, but real, not hushed with elegance, but alive with the heartbeat of hope. The hallway was narrow, the walls pale with soft wear, the lamps flickering as if they blinked in sleep. And everywhere there were signs of life, boots left beside bunks, a half-finished scarf draped over a crate, the scent of flour and lard drifting from the galley where a cook hummed in a low, Irish tune that seemed to wrap around you like a worn wool blanket. Evelyn smiled, and she said, "They dance here when the sun dips low, not for show, for joy." And she led you farther, through a small door and into a room warmed by oil lamps and laughter. And there, at the far side, a fiddler played, not for coin, not for stage, but for the sheer, soft beauty of it. And his bow moved like water over stone, like moonlight slipping across glass. And the sound he pulled from those strings made something inside you swell with a quiet ache you could not name. People danced in small steps, in worn shoes, in skirts patched with stories, and their hands found each other with the kind of comfort that can only be born from shared dreaming, not the grand dreaming of fortune and palaces, but the quiet dreaming of enough warmth, enough bread, enough peace to make a life worth living. You stood at the edge, uncertain, but Evelyn stepped forward, her hand out now, her eyes steady, and when you took it, the music folded around you both like mist, and you moved, not with rhythm, not with grace, but with something slower, something truer. And the others made space, nodding with smiles that spoke in all languages, and for a while you forgot the shape of your life. Before this moment, the room turned gently, the walls breathed in and out, and time itself seemed to soften, as if the ship had found a slower current. And through the motion, your eyes met hers again and again, and each time they did, it felt less like falling in love and more like remembering it, like recognizing something ancient and tender and already known. When the song ended, applause rose like bubbles light and full of warmth, and someone passed you a tin cup of cider, warm and spiced, and as you drank, Evelyn leaned closer, her voice just a murmur against your cheek. "Do you know the stars look different from down here? And so you followed her once more, upward now, back through the stairwells and the golden glow to the upper deck, where night had begun to stretch its long indigo fingers across the sky, and the wind had settled into a hum, soft and constant, and above, the stars indeed had arrived, not cold, not distant, but full and clear. Their light trembled in the ocean's reflection like a cathedral turned upside down. You leaned against the railing, side by side, the metal cool beneath your fingertips, and said nothing, because nothing needed saying, and around you the Titanic sailed, as if guided not by compass, but by memory, by quiet hope, by a promise whispered long ago, and still carried gently on the sea. The night had settled across the ocean like a soft woolen shawl, pulled slowly and lovingly over the shoulders of the sea. And as the Titanic moved through that darkness, it did not disturb the stillness, but it carried it, became a part of it. The glow from her portholes stretching outward in long golden threads across the black, until even the stars above seemed to lean in closer, listening, wondering, watching. You had returned to the deck once more after the music and cider and stories below. And though your shoes tapped softly across the wooden boards, there was no one to hear them now, only the wind salted and hushed, and the ship itself creaking softly like an old tree in moonlight, strong and certain, yet somehow gentle in its age. Evelyn stood at the very end of the forward promenade, her back to the wind, her scarf unpinned and caught in the air like a ribbon dancing across time, and her silhouette was cut from the night itself, her shoulders pale where the lamplight touched them, her posture not rigid, not waiting, just thereas though she belonged to that moment and had never belonged to anything else when you reached her. She did not speak, not at first, and you said nothing either. For what words could improve upon the hush of the ocean stretched around you like a great cathedral of stars and water and wind? What language could match the long sigh of the Atlantic in springtime? But after a while she turned, her hands wrapped in her coat sleeves, her face calm but shadowed, and when she spoke, it was as though she were confessing to the wind, not to you. "I was never meant to be on this ship," she said softly, her voice nearly lost to the sound of the waves below. "My father wanted me in Paris. My mother wanted me home, and I just wanted to breathe without asking permission." You watched her, your heart moving slowly in your chest, like the tide inside a shallow cove, and you nodded not in agreement, not in judgment, but in understanding, the kind of nod that says, "Yes, I too have looked for air where none was offered freely." She told you of the gardens behind her home, how they bloomed too perfectly, every petal clipped, every stem tied, how her life was trimmed like a hedge that was never allowed to grow wild, how her days were stitched in silver thread, but never warmth, never soil, never salt. You listened, your eyes on her face, but your heart tracing the paths of her words, following them like a lantern following footprints in the snow. And when she looked at you, finally, truly, as though daring you to say it wasn't enough, her story, her truth, you said nothing, only lifted her scarf gently from where it had tangled in the rail, and smoothed it across her shoulder. "This is the first time," she whispered. "I've done something because I wanted it, not for them, not to be good, just because it felt like breathing." And you, standing beside her in that wind and starlight, felt something shift, not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply, as if a door inside your chest had opened to let in the sound of her voice, and for the first time you reached for her hand, not with urgency, not with need, but with the slow certainty of one who knows how rare such moments truly are. She did not pull away. She held your hand like it was a seashell found on a foreign shore, fragile and beautiful and strange. And together you stood in the quiet, the salt on the wind clinging to your lashes, the stars above burning like lullabies, not yet sung that night as the ship sailed farther into the open sea. You walked together below deck once more, not to the third-class dancing halls this time, but through the ship's quieter corners, through the reading room now empty and glowing, with the last flickers of lamp oil, through the smoking room where the scent of tobacco still lingered in the velvet chairs, through corridors dressed in stillness and stories. She showed you the ship as she had come to know it, her favorite bench beneath the staircase where the light fell just right at mid-morning, the little niche in the library where a single red book waited unopened, the small gallery of paintings hung in the corridor beside the music room, each one more peaceful than the last, their brushstrokes full of breath and hush. And finally, you found yourselves outside again, near the very front of the ship, where few passengers wandered, where the breeze came clean and honest across the waves, and there, beneath the frozen stars and endless sky, she turned to you. This ship, she said, is the only place I've ever felt like a person, not a picture. I know it's only for a while, but I needed to know what it felt like, even once. You looked at her and felt your throat tighten, not with sorrow, but with beauty. The kind that hurts because it's fleeting, the kind that lingers because it cannot last. And in that silence, you leaned forward, not to steal a kiss, not to chase a moment, but to offer your forehead against hers. And she met you halfway, breath slow, eyes closed. Two strangers, no longer strangers, two wanderers, paused beneath the same vast sky. The ship moved forward, cutting through time, through silence, through salt, and you did not speak again that night. There was no need. The next day arrived quiet, but unusually cold, not bitter, not cruel, but carrying the kind of cold that feels old, as though it has traveled far to find you. And as you stirred beneath your blanket and reached for the woolen robe laid neatly at the foot of your bed, you noticed how the cabin held its breath, how the morning seemed to enter reluctantly, how the ship hummed low beneath your feet, not tense, but slower somehow, as if listening outside the porthole. The sea was impossibly still, a soft indigo that stretched forever without wave or crest, a frozen silk sheet draped across the world. And the air held a crispness that clung to every surface, sharp and invisible, and even your breath. As you pressed your palm against the glass, left behind no cloud, only a faint trace that faded as quickly as it came when you met Evelyn on the deck. Wrapped in a heavy velvet cloak, the color of winter violets, she said very little, only offering you a quiet smile, and a hand slipped into yours without invitation or hesitation. And together you walked the length of the promenade in silence, your footfalls light, your thoughts matching pace. And as you turned the corner near the bow, you noticed the faint shimmer on the horizon. Not land, not storm, but something white and wide and ghost-like in the distance. You paused, the wind curling around you like breath held too long, and Evelyn followed your gaze. Is that? She did not finish, but you nodded slowly, unsure of what you were nodding to. The sight, the idea, the impossibility of something so cold existing in a world that had felt for these last days so impossibly warm. An officer passed by then, his coat high at the neck, his eyes quick and unreadable. And though he said nothing to either of you, you felt a tremble in the air, not fear, not yet, but something older than fear. The feeling that the world is shifting, not loud, not sudden, but real. The day continued, as if nothing had changed. The dining saloon was full, as always, crystal chiming, spoons gently stirring tea, small laughter carried in soft waves, and you and Evelyn sat together, closer now, shoulders almost brushing, your knees bumping beneath the linen tablecloth, without apology, without retreat. And when dessert arrived, lemon tart with sugared peel, she fed you the first bite on the edge of her fork, and your laughter melted the room into something golden. Later, in the reading room, her head rested against your shoulder, and you read aloud from a novel neither of you cared to finish, for the words blurred into the softness of the hour, into the rhythm of pages turned and the creak of the ship and the distant sound of a piano playing in some unseen corridor. Evening came early that night, or so it seemed, and when the lamps were lit, their glow felt different, not warmer, not brighter, but more necessary, more precious, as though the darkness beyond the windows had grown thicker, more certain, and the stars overhead no longer blinked like lullabies, but like messengers carrying news too far away to reach you. The cold grew sharper as the night deepened, and as you stepped once more onto the outer deck, wrapped now in your heaviest coat, you felt it immediately, not on your skin, but in your breath, in your ears, in your very bones, the cold of ice, of something ancient, something that did not care for ships or stories, for lovers or passengers, for beauty or dreaming, and far ahead, like a sleeping whale caught in moonlight, the iceberg drifted, not jagged, not monstrous, but still vast, unmoved. You saw it only briefly, a shape, a shadow, a gleam, and then it passed from view, swallowed by the night, and for a moment the air felt almost warm in its absence, almost kind, and you and Evelyn stood together at the rail in silence, her arm now threaded fully through yours, her breath slow against your neck. "They say it's unsinkable," she whispered at last, her voice thinner than usual. "But everything sinks, eventually." You turned to her, your eyes searching, but she looked only outward, her gaze resting on the horizon that now seemed farther away than it ever had. And when she met your eyes again, there was no fear in them, only knowledge, only softness, only the peace of one who has already made peace with something unknown that night. You did not return to your cabin. Instead, you stayed together beneath blankets on a wooden bench near the quietest part of the ship, sharing warmth, sharing silence, her head tucked beneath your chin, her fingers curled around yours like vines around a lantern. And though the ship moved forward, the world around you stood still, wrapped in frost, kissed by stars, and held gently in a silence so deep it hummed. Neither of you spoke of tomorrow. Neither of you mentioned ice or steel or fate. Instead, she asked you what your favorite flower was, and you told her violets, because they grew in shadows and still reached for light, and she smiled and whispered, "Mine too," though you both knew it didn't matter, not now, not anymore. You were asleep when it happened. Not deep sleep, but that fragile space between rest and waking, where dreams still cling like morning fog to rooftops, and your body feels not quite your own, where breath slows to match the rhythm of a lullaby only the heart can hear, and the world around you becomes more feeling than form. You stirred slightly, not from sound, but from a shift in the stillness, a difference, a pause, a silence where silence should not be. And Evelyn, curled beside you beneath the wool blanket, did not wake, not yet, her breath steady, her hand still wrapped around yours like ivy in moonlight. Then came a sound not sharp, not loud, but low. A hum, a scrape, a sigh so deep it seemed to rise from the belly of the sea itself, like the ocean had breathed in sharply and forgotten to exhale. And the ship beneath you quivered barely, briefly, like a string pulled too tight, and then released. Your eyes opened to find the stars unchanged. They still blinked overhead in perfect stillness, scattered across the sky like salt over black velvet.com, and ancient and unaware. And yet, you knew something had shifted. Evelyn stirred beside you then, her brow furrowed faintly, her lashes fluttering once before her eyes opened, slow and clear. And when you whispered her name, she answered in a voice that trembled only slightly. Did you feel that? You nodded. Neither of you moved right away. You remained curled together beneath the blanket. Your breaths joined, your bodies warm against the creeping chill in the air. And for a long moment, you listened, not for panic, not for shouting, but for the absence of normal, the absence of music, of laughter, of footsteps overhead. And it was that absence that grew louder than any sound could. Eventually you rose, folding the blanket carefully, slipping on your coat with deliberate, quiet motions, as if too sudden a movement might disturb whatever had shifted below the surface of the night. And Evelyn stood beside you, wrapping her scarf once, twice around her neck, her gloved hands smoothing her skirt with care, as though preparing for a dinner. Not a disaster. You moved through the corridors slowly. There were others, now passengers drifting from cabins in silk robes and fur collars, brows, furrowed slippers soft against the carpets. Murmurs floating like dust motes in the lamplight. No alarms, still. No shouts, only questions passed from lip to lip like candlelight. Did you feel it? Was that the engines? Did something break? You and Evelyn made your way to the deck, and the cold that met you there was different. Not wind, not weather, but something raw, an edge in the air, a thinness that cut through wool and bone alike. And you pulled your coat tighter as you stepped forward, and Evelyn tucked her arm beneath yours, her body leaning into yours, not in fear, but in certainty. And then you saw it far ahead, at the very edge of the ship's path. The iceberg sat white, glowing faintly under starlight. Larger than any cathedral you had ever seen, a mountain born from silence and solitude, floating not like something alive, but like memory given shape. There was no violence in it, no explosion, no drama, only stillness, and the knowledge that two worlds had touched, that steel had kissed ice, and now the story would begin to bend. The crew moved quickly. Now orders called, low lifeboats, uncovered passengers, gently ushered toward the upper decks, not with panic, but with practiced care. And yet behind every word was the echo of something. Not said, the awareness that the air had changed, the stars had shifted. The hush was now a kind of waiting. Evelyn gripped your hand tighter, she said. Nothing. But her eyes met yours, and in them was everything. Love not yet spoken aloud. Futures half imagined, the warmth of shared silence. The ache of knowing too much and too little all at once. You did not ask if she was afraid. You simply stood together as the Titanic continued to glide through that silver night. Engines still humming, the sea still calm, the iceberg now behind, but the weight of it. A violin played somewhere, faint, morning beautiful, and for a moment you thought perhaps it was a dream after all. A long, soft dream stitched from stars and longing and salt. But the cold said otherwise, and so did the sound the stars made. By the time you reached the upper deck again, the mood had changed, not to panic, not chaos, but to something hushed and reverent, as if everyone on board had heard the same unspoken truth, had felt it settle in their chest like frost along a windowsill. Delicate, quiet, undeniable, the stars remained calm, the sea still glass. But beneath the surface of everything, beneath voices, beneath glances, the kind that presses against your ribs when you know the ending has begun, but still hope it might, slow crewmen moved with lanterns in gloved hands, the gold glow trembling like candlelight on old cathedral walls, casting shadows that danced along the deck as passengers gathered in groups, mothers holding children's hands, elderly couples bundled close, young men carrying blankets, some whispering prayers into collars or gripping rosary beads as if they were the last pieces of home. Evelyn's hand stayed in yours the entire time. She did not ask what was happening. She knew. You could see it in the stillness of her face, in the steadiness of her walk, in the way she looked, not at the officers, nor the crowd, but out across the Black Sea, as if searching for something just beyond the horizon, something already calling to her from the other side of the night. An officer guided you toward the starboard side, his voice polite but firm, asking Evelyn to step into line with the other women. You felt her fingers tighten in yours, just once, then loosen. She turned to face you, her scarf now pulled tighter around her throat, her cheeks flushed, not with cold, but something deeper, the ache of having to say what cannot be said in full, only felt. You know what they'll say, she said softly. Women and children first. I won't argue, but I won't go without this. Navy blue, the same one she had worn in her hair when you met her that morning on the deck. The same color as the deep ocean sky now stretching behind her. You clutched it like it was something living. The wind had grown stronger now, but not cruel, only cold and constant and old, like breath from some long-forgotten mouth. And the lanterns along the deck flickered with each gust, their glow flickering across faces. Like memories fading in and out of reach, the line shuffled forward slowly. You and Evelyn stood together until the very end, until the moment came when the officer looked at you both and nodded, not kindly, not sternly, just once, with a tiredness that told you he had seen too much already. Tonight, sir, she need to board now. You did not speak, you simply turned to her and placed your forehead against hers again, as you had on that peaceful night not long ago. And in that touch, you told her everything, that you would never forget the sound of her laughter beneath deck, the smell of spiced cider on her lips, the way she had leaned into your shoulder during the story neither of you finished, the way her eyes had held you in silence like the sea holds the moon. She stepped back slowly and boarded. The lifeboat lowered like a cradle, descending into the dark, ropes creaking, water waiting, and her face remained tilted up toward yours the entire time, her eyes fixed on yours until the moment the lantern light no longer reached her. You stayed at the railing long after she vanished into the black. Others moved around you, footsteps, urgent now, some voices rising, a child crying, the orchestra beginning once more with quiet insistence, playing not for applause but for memory. And they chose a hymn this time, something soft and old and made from hope. The cold pressed deeper now, and still you did not move. You stood where she had left you, Evelyn's ribbon wrapped around your wrist, the knot tight, the fabric damp with night air, your hands gripping the rail as though it might hold more than the ship, as though it could hold her, hold time, hold back the sea. But the sea, as ever, asked only for silence, and the stars, as ever, answered. The lifeboats were nearly gone now. One by one they had lowered into the night, like falling leaves, like stars retreating from dawn, quiet and slow and final. The creak of rope and the splash of entry swallowed quickly by the stillness of the water. And those left behind stood close to one another now, not in panic, not yet, but in quiet disbelief, the kind that settles over a soul when something too large to imagine begins to actually unfold. You had not moved far from the rail, the ribbon still wrapped around your wrist, darkened by night air and salt, and the place where Evelyn's fingers had last touched your palm still tingled with the echo of warmth. Though she was gone from sight, gone from the ship, her voice now drifting farther from yours with each soft oar stroke into the dark. There was no anger in you, no rush, only the deep, wide knowing that something beautiful had passed through your life, however brief, and had left behind something wider than grief, something quieter than fear, something like peace, like love, like stillness in a storm. The orchestra played on their coats, buttoned high, their fingers trembling not from fear but from cold, yet still they played old hymns, slow waltzes, quiet songs that once filled dance halls and now filled the air with memory. And it was this music, more than anything else, that held the passengers in place. A man beside you was weeping softly, not loud, not shaking, just tears sliding down his cheeks, in rhythm with the strings, and he held a small photograph in his hands, worn at the edges. The image too faded to see clearly in the dim light, but it glowed faintly with the gold edge of a frame carried close to the heart for many years. Across the deck, a woman in silver shoes stood with her arms wrapped around herself, humming along to the melody, her eyes closed, her lips moving with each note, and you wondered if she was remembering a dance long ago. A night when the room was full and laughter rose like firelight, and the world had not yet shifted. You made your way slowly toward the stern, drawn by nothing in particular, only a feeling, the way one is drawn toward a shoreline, even in fog. And as you walked, you passed open doors, now silent, hallways empty, but still golden with light, chairs tucked in, teacups half drunk on polished tables, the signs of a life that had not yet finished but would not be resumed. Near the very back of the ship you found a quiet corner where a few men stood in close conversation, not panicked, not wild, just talking low and slow, their voices filled with the kind of steadiness that comes not from bravery but from acceptance. One offered you a sip from a silver flask. You took it without a word. The taste was sharp and bitter, but it warmed your chest, and the man gave you a nod, not of greeting, not of farewell, just a nod, like a bridge between strangers in the same dream. From this place you could see the water below, still so calm, so cruelly calm, and above it the sky remained scattered with stars, unmoved by what unfolded below, but watching nonetheless, their light thin and silver like the threads of a story unspooling into the dark. You thought of Evelyn not with fear but with softness. You pictured her in the lifeboat, her scarf wrapped tightly, her fingers clasped in her lap, her eyes lifted still toward the ship, toward you. And perhaps she was imagining your face now too, remembering your voice, recalling how it felt to stand beneath the violin's lullaby with your hand against hers, and you hoped, more than anything, that she had not looked back in sorrow, but in gratitude. The ship shuddered once beneath your feet, a long, low groan from deep within her spine, like an old tree bending, and someone whispered, "She's listening now." But there was no scream, no thunder, only the music still playing, the sea still, and the quiet descent of the world into something new. You sat on a nearby bench, folding your hands together in your lap, and tilted your face upward, letting the stars fill your eyes one last time, letting the cold sting your cheeks, not in cruelty, but in clarity. And with each breath you took, you felt something deep inside you loosening, not giving up, not breaking, but letting go. And beneath the music, you heard it, the sea, calling softly now, not in threat, but in invitation. The last lights flickered, not all at once, but slowly, gently, like candles near the end of their wick, glowing, sputtering, dimming into velvet shadows. And those who remained on deck did not cry out. They only watched, as one by one the stars seemed to descend and the ship folded herself inward. You had not moved from the bench, though your body ached with the cold, and your breath came in slower and slower sighs. And when the final note from the violin drifted into silence, you felt it like the closing of a book, the end of a chapter whose story would echo long beyond its pages. Some still moved, stepping quietly, linking arms, finding handrails. Some prayed. Some simply sat, as you did, eyes closed, listening not for help, but for peace. The tilt of the ship was unmistakable. Now the bow dipped forward like a curtsy, too deep, and the stern rose inch by inch, creaking, groaning, whispering to the ocean in a language made of strain and sorrow. You stood, not to run, not to fight, but because it was time to rise and meet whatever came, not with fear, but with the dignity of having loved, having witnessed beauty, having held another's hand in starlight. The sea reached out with arms wide and ancient. She did not roar, she did not crash. She opened, and the Titanic, magnificent, proud, impossibly real, entered her final descent like a queen stepping into sleep, carried not down, but onward, into the fold of history and the hush of myth. There was no time to think, only the swell of water, only the shock of cold, only the way it felt like falling into a memory you had never lived but always known. Your body met the water with a jolt, but your mind remained wrapped in softness, as though Evelyn's hand still held your wrist, the ribbon still tied tight, her voice still in your ear, whispering some old lullaby from a life neither of you would live long enough to finish. The stars tilted, the ship groaned once more, then silence, true, deep silence. You drifted, not swimming, not struggling, only floating, only breathing, or what felt like breathing. The sky above you wide and eternal. The water below colder than bone, but somehow no longer cruel. And in that space between sinking and sleep, you saw her again, not in body, but in memory. Evelyn in the ballroom, laughter beneath golden chandeliers. Evelyn in the reading room, eyes closed on your shoulder. Evelyn on the deck, scarf blowing, ribbon lifting like a prayer. And Evelyn in the lifeboat, her face tilted upward, looking toward the place where you had once stood. You smiled, lips pale, eyes half closed, because this, too, was love, not the kind that lasts forever, but the kind that lives fully, for a moment, for a night, for a voyage, and echoes through time like the hush of waves across glass. And the sea, vast and endless, held you gently. She cradled you, not in violence, but in memory. And the stars, still shining, still watching, blinked softly, like eyes filled with tears.